collective mashup of hearing our voice. So are we unmuted? Is everyone unmuted? Carly, can you do that for us?
I'm not sure how to unmute everyone. Well, let me see.
I think I've just found out how to do it. It's on manage participants. Everyone is now unmuted.
Okay, hi.
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 Beautiful choir. And then one more thing before we mute ourselves. Could everybody just say where they're calling from, and we can just hear our collective presence? Chicago.
Actually, let me say one thing too. Where John, it won't let me record. So could you press record?
I got it.
It looked like it was going to let me, but it won't. Okay, cool.
Okay, so we'll just try that one more time now that we're recorded so we can hear where everybody's calling from. If you could just share where you're from right now. Chicago.
New York.
Chicago.
Sweden. Okay, thank you guys so much. Now, John, if you want to go ahead and mute everyone. So my name is Andrea Dennis, and I work with the Global Purpose Movement as well as Green Heart International. And the lay of the land and then turn it over to John. So we are organizing this through the Global Purpose Movement, which focuses on individual actualization of our purpose and also our group collective purpose. And we're working with people that are really on purpose, agents all around the world. And we are so delighted to have Bruce here today to represent his work. And John, I'd like to introduce now, is a colleague with the Global Purpose Movement and also a co-founder of Synergy Forum and Bride Alliance. He is a leadership consultant and works one-on-one with individuals as a life path guide. He was also the head of the international spiritual community, the Shambhala School. And between 2012 and 2015, he worked as part of the leadership team of a project based in Interlaken, Switzerland, exploring how a deeper understanding of spiritual awakening might inform globally cooperative efforts toward the evolution of human civilization. He is a co-author with Dustin DePerner, who's also on the team of Global Purpose Movement, of the book Earth is Eden, an integral exploration of the Trans-Himalayan teachings, which is also a path that Bruce Lyon is on. And John teaches both traditional Tibetan Buddhism and a global approach to the spiritual path. He lives in Berlin. He's a brother. He introduced me to Bruce about 1 year ago at this exact time. I just first heard about Bruce, so it just seems like a magical year coming together to introduce this call to all of you today. So I want to welcome you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
Cool. Thank you, Andrea. And yeah, so we're going to do a little introduction train. So I'm now going to introduce Bruce. And it's my great pleasure to have this opportunity. Bruce, thank you so much for making yourself available. So Bruce is the founder of Shambhala School, Shambhala Tantra, and he's formerly on the governance of ISTA, the International School of Temple Arts, that he's still very connected to, where he developed, in company with the faculty there, a path of soul initiation that is really one of the most respected and widely attended series of retreats and tantric retreats in the world right now. So Bruce is from New Zealand, and that's where he lives, apart from his teaching schedule. And he is initiating the temple training at Haydn, a location in New Zealand at the moment, where they're going to be exploring a 6-week program that will go deep into what it means for a community to live together, exploring the mysteries of awakening, embodiment, purpose, and love in the context of a modern-day mystery school. Bruce has been my closest teacher and dear friend for the last 7 years, and he really is one of the most extraordinary beings I've ever had the opportunity to be close to. So it's a real gift and privilege to be able to have this conversation with you, brother, and to explore with you some of the topics that we in the Global Purpose Movement are really gathering around and trying to go deep with.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure to hang out with you always, and these conversations are always enlivening and stimulating, and the fact that we've got other people to be present and share with them is great. Thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure, pleasure. So Bruce, can we just start off by exploring, so the purpose is really central to the global purpose movement. We're in an exploration of how purpose can be transformational in the world. And one of the reasons I wanted to invite you to do this interview is that you are one of the most alive and on purpose people that I've ever come into contact with. And I know purpose has formed a core part of your path. And so I wonder if you'd just be up for exploring with us and sharing some of what does purpose mean to you?
Right. Okay, great. So first of all, I want to be enigmatic, like the purpose that you can know is not the purpose, like the Tao. And the reason I want to start there is because the concept of purpose has been so much related to what we can know. So, holy books, somebody is inspired by God and they write it down. We create mission statements, we have bills of rights, we have constitutions, all of these, kind of our understanding of purpose. But to me, purpose is not something that can be understood. It's something that is revealed. It's something that is dynamic, that it's alive, it's creative, it's spontaneously appropriate to the moment. It's not a fixed thing that can be followed. So now I'm going to tell you what I think purpose is, which is just more concepts, but they're hopefully concepts that push against our current concepts, and therefore they're evolutionary, and therefore they have purpose in them. Mm-hmm. So I would say that purpose is the creative, dynamic energy that permeates all of the universe, both matter and consciousness, and is the causing, driving force of evolution. Mm-hmm. I would say that purpose, it reveals itself, and it's the loving marriage of the will of God and the will of the goddess. And to me, that's a really important definition of purpose, because so much of our purpose carries this masculine awareness of the will of God. And my own journey was that, to awaken to the will of God, to go so deeply into the core of the soul that we find this dynamic energy which is guiding us. But often the will of the goddess is missing, and that the will of the goddess is this life force that comes up through substance and is one with this will of God transcendent energy. So I would also say that purpose, that the organ for registering purpose in the human being is the heart. And so much of our purpose is oriented towards our mind and to our concepts, but it's the heart that can link these two currents of energy that are the will of God and the will of goddess, and bring them together in love. So I feel like purpose as life is something that is transmitted through the heart as a living vibrational reality, rather than a conceptual thing that you can have and follow and enroll other people in. So, there's a beginning to a discussion about purpose.
Awesome. Thank you. And there's a lot there that I would love us to go deeper with, and just to give people a sense of what we're going to be doing here, we're going to be speaking to Bruce and exploring these topics for an hour. And then for the second half an hour, there'll be the opportunity for people to ask some questions. But this, the masculine and the feminine side of purpose is something I'd love us to go into more over the course of this interview. And I think, in terms of our work, it's super important. We're definitely in an exploration of what it means to go deeper than purpose as a concept, than purpose as a predefined goal, and actually be in the flow of this living energy, which is already present, which is already permeating the whole of manifestation. Before we go deeper with that, I'd be interested to ask you, how has purpose showed up in your life? If you speak a little bit about your past, Bruce, that's had you arrive where you are, and also how it shows up for you now.
Well, I think actually my current, way of talking about purpose has evolved, because I think purpose for me was like a very distant call, like somebody sounding a note somewhere that I felt I had to respond to. I didn't have a choice. I didn't want a choice. So, I would call that was like my soul purpose, my higher purpose. And I got caught in my life, like many people do, between between this idea that I had a responsibility as a human being, as a father, as a care provider, as somebody to sustain my life, and also my soul calling, a deep calling, a sense of destiny, a sense of service to the collective. So for me, purpose was a painful process of trying to reconcile different drives in my own nature. And ultimately, the way I chose to respond to purpose was to listen deeply to that call and to follow it no matter what. And in a way, it was quite a masculine path, a path of discipline, a path of giving up everything for this deep call to purpose. And I didn't really have models. In fact, I remember walking into the Vatican and looking at the Pieta, this image of Jesus's body draped across Mary's knees, broken and used up, and this kind of masculine concept that no greater love is that to give up your life, to give up matter for spirit, to give up everything that we have for something greater than us. And so I was driven by that was the model, and of course I experienced giving up everything for that. And in hindsight, I wished I'd had better models. I wished I'd had models of people who actually were able to reconcile human life and the embodied life and the spiritual life. But that wasn't the model I had, and it's not the model that most of us have had. Most of us have had this kind of model where relationship and purpose are kind of adversarial, and where spirit and matter are adversarial, and you can't serve God and mammon. And, so I was coming from this call that if I responded to my purpose, it meant the sacrifice of everything that was not that. And so I would say I was somewhat of a missionary in my early awakening to purpose, and I paid the price of that, and those around me also paid the price of that. I think that response to purpose was a contribution to the ending of my first marriage and a dislocation from my children for a while, which was incredibly painful. And I feel like this pain is experienced by many people on the planet that are trying to reconcile making a living and being part of a human civilization, and they're feeling the destruction of the earth, and they're feeling the pain and the suffering of the collective, and they're caught between how do I be a human being and be in integrity in my own survival needs, and how do I surrender to the collective and serve that in some deep way. So for me, that deep response to purpose was a response to my soul is called to something, and I cannot not be it, and so that was my connection. Now I think I understand purpose differently, and the way I understand purpose is that it's an integration of the life force, and that life force comes not just from our soul destiny, but it comes up through our bodies, it comes up through the earth itself. And I would feel like I have a much more tantric idea of what purpose's life is.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things which I most deeply respect about you, and that I've had the experience of witnessing in you, is witnessing you take all of these different corners of the path to integrate them, and to be on this stretch for a while, and to come to a point where you've been able to say, I feel that this is alive in me now. And then to take on this other stretch of the path, so that is complementary and actually moves in a totally different direction, and come to a point where you can say, I feel that this is alive in me now. And yes. That's been a real teaching in itself, to witness that. We have a lot of people, Bruce, who who are accessing our work, who are very much in the process of, they're on that edge in their own experience of connecting to their sense of soul purpose, we could say. And they're in the exploration of how to download that, how to upload that. Could you say a little bit about what that looked like for you, that particular shift earlier in your life?
Yeah, I think I'd add through load to download and upload, but okay. I think the way that it happened for me was a deep sense of soul purpose that came through my inner exploration, my inner path. And then the journey was how to take what my life was already and to integrate that. And I see this as the place that many people are on the planet. The planet itself is in this place of trying to integrate the higher values and a higher purpose with our normal survival drives. So I don't know that I did that very well. I think I did it ungracefully, and I did it in a way that now I would want other people to have an opportunity to do it more gracefully. And I think it's because of the split that I experience in our world. I think that our politics is adversarial. It's left and right politics. I think our hearts are immature. And that immaturity, means that we set off matter and spirit against each other. We set off the masculine and feminine against each other. We're at an immature stage of integration. And so therefore, what I would want for the people now who are making that integration is to have a much more graceful route to it than I had.
Beautiful. Thank you. So could you say, the next question I really want to explore with you is if you could describe the range of your work as it exists now. But I wonder if as a lead into that, you could say a few words on what would that integrated path of purpose discovery and going deeper to be able to live this kind of fuller measure of our being look like, as far as how you see the opportunities available to people today.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, that I feel like I've taken many paths, and I think one of the immature expressions of purpose is that it's directional. It's like the off point of your compass, that you have a purpose and that gives you direction. But to me, real purpose embraces paradox, that it can hold the tension of opposite directions as an expression of life without getting into battle between them. And it used to be hilarious to have gatherings of friends sometimes, and I'd have gatherings of friends and they would look at me and like, how did you invite this person? It's like, how could you? We're so ideologically and goal driven that people line up on their goals, and people who have opposite goals are often in an adversarial position when life may be driving them in the exact opposite direction. But that doesn't mean that they are not sharing purpose, that they're not sharing life. So for me, for example, my ascending path, there was a time when I was to get to the top of the mountain, no matter what, on my knees, bloodied, it didn't matter. So it was a path of transcendence. I had to let go of all of my attachment to form, to be naked and alone in the presence of the burning bush of divinity. And, many people are on that path, and many people, want to drag others up the mountain and have everybody become the world, or become conscious, at a certain level like they are. The trouble with that path is it's unrealistic. Not everybody is going to become enlightened. And that if real purpose is not the raising of everybody's consciousness, the real purpose, if you are part of a whole, is to realize that those who have had the privilege and the opportunity to do that now have an opportunity to serve the whole. So therefore, purpose is not directional in the sense of getting everybody to a certain place, or a leader saying, we all need to go in this direction. Purpose is the capacity to embrace the fact that everybody is choosing through the core of their own being their alignment with purpose. And it may look oppositional, but it's actually part of something greater. So I think that in my teaching and the work these days, is the opportunity is to break out of the paradigms of there being particular paths, and to celebrate the fact that there are paths, but that each person is called upon to awaken in themselves their own direct knowing of their path. And that is to be celebrated by the group that they are part of, rather than, the kind of trying to channel everybody like the banks of a river along a particular lineage or direction.
Thank you. So could you?
So when I came down from the ascending path and started to go into the depths and into the body, then of course many of the people that were that I related to in one direction now did not relate at all because I was going in the opposite.
Yeah. You are wonderfully controversial in various different communities, and I know in our relationship that part of our kind of soul relay exchange in a certain way was that you founded Shambhala School, this at first on the ground residential spiritual school, and I think it was 2001, and that ran for some years, and then it became an international spiritual community. You passed that to me in 2011. You said to me that part of the reason you wanted to do that was to empower the next generation, and part of it was to free you up, for you to explore more this descending path, so that you could, round that out in your own being, and you could also learn to be able to stand for it as in terms of other people's pathways as well. And I know that the integration of both of these, the ascending path and also the descending path, and their integration is key to the work that you're able to offer to people now.
Yeah. And I think that what happened for me is that I did establish this community, then this mystery school back in 2001, and I established it out of pure will, from that mountaintop lightning, this will be no matter what. But once I got living in community with 30 young people from all over the world, then the deep issues of sexuality and embodiment and money and the things that really drive our physical plane and the lower chakras became really important again. Mm-hmm. And I also realized that transcendence was not going to do it. And in order to truly, deeply be embodied, I had to go back down and really deeply investigate the sexual and emotional and embodied life so that the spirituality was fully grounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, both in terms of my witnessing of how it works for most of us on the spiritual path, like the areas of abstract mind and all kinds of expansive concepts, and not the areas that most people get tripped up on their daily deal. It's the areas that most of us get tripped up on, are those of us who feel called to live more and more fully as love, is these areas that are most intimate, the emotional levels, the sexual levels, the physical levels, where we're most deeply in contact with each other. And certainly in the global purpose movement, with our exploration of how do we support individuals and collectives to connect to purpose more and more deeply, there's two wings to it. There's one is the being able to connect to and download, upload, throughload that purpose, but the other is finding all those places in us that actually are pretty tender around the whole thing, and are pretty tender in relationship, and being able to say yes to those as well.
Yeah. And I really think that, the changes in civilization and where purpose comes from is both super conscious, it's descending, it's inspiration, but it's also coming up. And what I mean by that is it's Kundalini, it's the life force through the body. And because we have made spirituality and sexuality polarities, and because we have made the will of God and the will of Goddess adversarial, the way we treat our animals, not just collectively, but our own animals, to me is horrendous. We should call the SPCA on everybody, because the way we treat our biological forms that have evolved in millions of years on this planet, by putting them in little boxes in front of screens with fluorescent lights and lighting, and driving them towards purpose without truly understanding and considering the power of our instincts, the power of our biology, the wild nature of our own beings that that have evolved on this planet. We are, my experience of myself and my experience of our collective is that I was mistreating my own animal, and I was making my animal drives wrong. I was making them contrary to everything that I was trying to do as a spiritual being. So for me, the deep integration again of our animal nature and the welcoming it as part of the great marriage between soul and body is a critical part of what needs to happen on the planet, and what needs to be made available to people on their spiritual journey.
Thank you. So I think for a lot of people, in our work, this understanding of both this deeper understanding of purpose as as more than a concept, more than an idea, in terms of it being this life force in the core of our souls, and also the understanding of it as present in the core of our bodies, as something that is seeking to well up from our embodiment, will be a deeper dive in a certain way into how we can all relate to purpose. And I wonder, you spoke a little bit before about how the more kind of transpersonal, ascending form of purpose came online for you in your life at an earlier point. Could you say a few words about how this more feminine side of purpose, the purpose that wells up from your body, started to come online? How was that experience?
Yeah, well, it was always there for me. My body has always had a strong life. And so one of the ways that was a very early shamanic training. A lot of my inner training has happened from inner beings. And this was a Maori shaman who put me through 3 years of just following my kinesthetic sense. And my body also, I was also part of a spiritual path that was very ascending and had lots of rituals where you had to stand for 5 hours to prove you were a man and download energy. One day my body just walked out. It just walked out of a ritual and never went back. And I went with it. It was like the horse had decided that the rider was an idiot and it was going to, wander off by itself. And so my body has always been a strong teacher, but a lot of the time I overrode it rather than really listen to it, because I didn't believe that it had, and none of our culture tells us that it has a sentiency and a life force and a wisdom that is so needed to integrate with our soul. So it came to me that way, and it also came to me because I denied it. And then after I made my ascent path, I found some good feminine teachers. So teachings, for example, a Jungian analyst who worked with the dark feminine. We barely spoke at all, but when we worked together, we would laugh and cry and work with the body. And so she helped me awaken that. Working with tantrikas and accessing what lies beneath my sexual energy was also really important in that path.
Thank you. So could you say a few words now, Bruce, about what is your work now? Maybe a few words about Ista and Haydn, and what does it look like in a concrete way?
Right. Well, I guess, part of the deep purpose or the story that I tell myself is that, we live at these extraordinary times where the evolution of the planet has to make this big jump, where all of these forces, the survival of our economies and our environment and our health and everything is this perfect planetary initiation process. And so within that story, I'm here as part of a collective whose job it is to roll a civilization and replace it with a civilization based on love and freedom. So that's the big picture purpose that I'm living in. But it's a dynamic process, and I don't understand the way except to follow this deep dynamic power in my being. But I do know that I'm not alone in this, and that many people are feeling through resonance and vibration, the heart of humanity is maturing, and we're starting to resonate with each other and feel each other and come together and self-organize. So part of the work that I'm involved in is what I would call the restoration of the mystery schools, the re-anchoring of the temples, the creating of those places on the earth where we can remember together, that we free ourselves from all of the dogma, that we trust ourselves again to source ourselves directly through new revelations from our spirit, from our body, and from consciousness, and we come together and collectively share that. So these are temples of soul initiation where we educate ourselves into what is our birthright and where we can enter into new civilization together.
Thank you.
So part of that work is the Ista work is creating, week-long temples around the world that are like the modern day revival tents. They tents open for have these experiences and then they go. I see somebody's unmuted their mic, so maybe.
Yeah, could everyone make sure they're muted, because there's someone who's got some background noise going on.
Thanks.
There we go. I think we got it. Go for it, Bruce.
And so some of this is this global process of teaching and finding our tribe globally, and then part of it also is these places like I'm doing here at Haydn that are dedicated to people who want an integrated path to accelerate their awakening, to come together with others, to take what I would call soul initiation, which is to really deeply shift their identity into the soul, to fully honor their embodiment and to honor their transcendent connection with the divine, and to enter into group process, because I think part of where we're going as civilization is a deep organization and resonance between groups that vibrate in the same energy that we vibrate to. So this energy of life and purpose calls to itself between people. And so temples like this are dedicated to that.
Thank you. Yeah. So I mean, that's something in the global purpose movement we're in an exploration of, which is not just the support of individual purpose, but the exploration of group purpose and the exploration of groups being, there's a phrase that we come across a lot at the moment, which is that what's going on the planet at the moment is a movement of movements. And so, there's this intergroup activity that's starting to play out. And, in the global purpose movement as well, the team had some retreat time at Dustin's house in California just recently after we ran an event at the IONS conference. And it was a beautiful time that we had together. And we went deep into our sense mission to support an initiation for humanity into its purpose, and so there's these wider and wider scales of purpose that that we can enter into as we recognize our connection and our unity with those who we are already connected to and at one with. And I wondered if you could say a bit about that, because I know you and I both come from a tradition where there are these wider and vaster kind of scales of purpose that this whole kind of cosmic drama is understood to be playing itself out through. And I know that cosmic purpose, planetary purpose have been a huge focus of your work, as well as it's living through your own individual life. You founded Shambhala School, Shambhala Tantra. There's these teachings around these wider scales of purpose. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I'm really keen to get through this global initiation so we can play with this. Like, I kind of feel like the Earth is at this same place that somebody is at a midlife crisis. It's like their health is gone, and so they have to go to a healer, and that they kind of have to remember their purpose, and they have to kind of reorient their life. And so the planet has to worry for a while about resetting the environment and changing the financial system and overcoming the political dramas and wars and the refugee issues and the imbalance of money, all of those. That feels like that's just our crisis. But, once you get through the crisis, then you actually remember who the fuck you are and what you came for and what the bigger picture is, and get on with being that. And so I would love to experience Earth on the other side of that crisis, when we discover, we're revealed to us, what is this amazing thing of 6 to 8 billion human beings on a planet spinning around a galaxy, in an expanding universe. What is our big picture? What is the thing that we as a united...
Oh, we lost him. Bruce combusted in the flames of his own fire. Okay. Well, I'm sure he'll come back. He'll sign back in. He may have... I wonder whether his phone lost its battery. Andrea, I invite you to jump in anytime with any questions that you have as well. So for everyone who's on this call, you can see Andrea right now on the screen who I work with. And Andrea, we've been speaking about this recently. Andrea's kind of like social lube. She's someone who has an incredible capacity for deep warmth and connection. I always find that I love working with Andrea. She's a perfect foil for my particular energy, because she has a wisdom about how these topics relate to real human lives, and how this stuff plays out in our families, how it plays out in our relationships, that I'd love to bring into this conversation. So please feel free to jump in anytime, Andrea.
Don't make me blush on Zoom. I just sent Bruce the Zoom link, so he's back in. And I will definitely jump in. And to everyone else on the call, please feel free to write your questions down as well, which we'll be opening up to in about 20 minutes. And you can do so by adding those into the chat.
Mm-hmm. Did you say that you saw it just jump on? He's jumped on again, Andrea?
Yeah, he just reached out on Facebook, and I sent him the Zoom link.
Okay, cool. As everyone can see, you can judge the professionalness of how we do our work by how we deal with such a little gap as this. I like to think we're doing quite well.
Oh, yeah. Although this is really where we insert like all of our transformational jokes that we should have on hand, which we don't.
It would be awesome if we had transformational
Does
jokes.
anybody have a spiritual
Funny. That's
okay.
so
Good.
funny. I was just
saved us.
talking about the leap into a global purpose, and my computer died.
Awesome. We got you back. Yeah, we were sensing that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, brother. We were sensing that you had combusted in the fire of your own life force.
Yeah. Well, maybe we're not quite ready for the conversation.
Absolutely, but let's still continue to explore it. We can download it as a possibility.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's that. We're self-organizing based on soul now, as more and more people initiate themselves into their deep wisdom, and they come together through the recognition of the resonance of their hearts. Then we start to form organs within humanity which are capable of downloading far greater energies than we can individually. So I think that we are at a stage of revelation of what we're all for. And now I'm not saying that somebody will tell us what we're for. Like, I think our new leaders are not those who can tell us where we're going. They are those who have already arrived. That actually purpose is something that we are not moving towards. It's something we are. And so I feel like as that happens, it will reveal itself in all of our hearts collectively, who we are and what we're for and what the earth is for.
Nice. Thank you very much. And I want to touch in on the topic of power as well. I'd love you to say a few words on the connection between purpose and power. One of the things, that really hit me when I first connected to your work was, you wrote an article which was basically like, look, love and light are not enough. If we're really going to have a global transformation happen, then there needs to be the energy of power that's involved in this as well. And I'd love you to say a few words about the connection between purpose and power, and the role of power, and how you understand power.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of different types of power. And, for me, the beautiful integration of power is the invincibility of the human spirit with the utter vulnerability of the human being. Like, if you bring those two energies deeply together. And I think what I meant by power in those early days was the reclaiming of the kingdom of earth as heaven. So in the Jesus and the Christian story, Jesus was like, my kingdom is not of this world. And so the giving up of this world for some greater heaven. And what that produced is really a generation of people who sought love and light, but gave up power. And power in that sense is the power to be embodied, to make the kingdom of heaven on earth, to make this planet, or really reveal this planet as itself already heaven. And so I would say purpose and power is, in the biblical sense, it comes from the tree of life rather than the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that tree of life is at the core of the Garden of Eden. And that tree of life is the power that resides at the core of the earth, as well as at the core of our spirit. So for me, the restoration of power to those who have love and light is such an important piece, because if those people who love don't claim their power, then those people who don't love but want power, it's left in their hands. And so the reactivation of the spiritual warrior and the unlocking of that power that has been used to dominate and to have power over, but can be used to defend the principles of the heart. So I feel like the new generation needs to re-engage with power in a healthier way, and in a way that is intimately connected with the unfoldment of love.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So Andrea, I'm going to invite you in if there's anything. I realize I've kind of been hogging Bruce a little bit. So I want to invite you into being part of this conversation if you'd like to get involved.
You've been hogging him for years, John, but I'm glad you'll share for us now. Yeah, thank you. I want to kind of bring this back to something that you had spoken earlier about, which was this graceful entry into living this ascendant and descendant, purpose flowing through us. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, especially in our work, a lot of individuals just coming into sort of this purpose field for the first time. How does that look like to you, that graceful entry and living of that?
Well, I think it's the embracing of duality, like of all aspects of duality, which means integrated spiritual awakening, which honors fully the embodiment parts of the mystery, as well as the soul, as well as the spirit. So that means looking at our emotional education and the way we handle ourselves as emotional beings, which we have very little education about. The awakening of ourselves as our sexuality, like the utter primitive nature of sexuality on the planet, because we are not educating ourselves how this energy, this life force which emerges at our sexuality, is the very energy that can also help us transcend. And we can write sonnets with it, we can dance with it, we can do so much with these powers of the body if they're integrated with the powers of spirit. So I would say a much more graceful approach is a holistic approach that really recognizes matter as divine, as spirit, and that the body has its own wisdom and its own powers that need to be brought to the soul.
And who are some of those living teachers around the world today that you would perhaps recommend some of our audience members to check out, who are really at the forefront of some of those areas?
Yeah, well, it's so tricky, that one, because the teaching field of the earth has become a smorgasbord, and once your heart is awakened and you have a sense of your own resonance, then that will guide you by who to be resonant with. If you haven't had that awakening yet, it's very hard to gauge, because you're not able to source yourself from your own awakening, and you are putting your trust really in somebody's path. So I would just look for those who have an integrated demonstration in their own life of the values and the qualities that they are seeking to impart, and that they hold your sovereignty and development of your own wisdom of what's right for you as a very important quality. And I would say at the moment where we are in the world, there's very few people are fully integrated. And so having a range of different teachers in different areas is quite wise. You know, somebody who knows a lot about your emotional and sexual development may not be so great on your non-dual awakening. Somebody who knows how to transmit the void to you may not be somebody who has done their emotional work. So I think that in the future, our teachers will become the group rather than this kind of idealization of an individual as somebody who has it all together. So I would recommend that.
That is, yeah. Thank you so much for that advice. I wanted to just ask you a little bit about the masculine and feminine sort of doing versus being. And when we were speaking before this call, you were talking about how a lot of times, you know, we put together these panels and then we have these conversations and we're just speaking out to the world, and sort of this new way will be we're just hanging out and it's so much fun. We'll just be inviting people in. So especially for us kind of doers out there, like the people of the global purpose movement, and I'm sure many of the people on this call, how do you rest in that balance of being and that invitation of hanging out and building community in sort of this organic way? Could you speak more about how you've been playing with that?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, historically, purpose and relationship have often been contrary to each other. Like somebody focused on purpose, and often more the masculine orientation is purpose, is having to sacrifice relationship. And somebody focused on relationship often sacrifices purpose. But a bigger definition of purpose that includes relationship, that relationship itself is a purpose, and that the field of connection between us is as important as whatever individually we are doing or collectively we are doing as our purpose. So for me, what that means is conferences and festivals and so on, where the delight is the relationship itself. So often now I will go hang out in the world with other people who are alive just for the pure joy of being with them, and knowing that when we're with each other, more life evolves, and then we can share that. So rather than the kind of old conference model, which is everybody comes in with their business card of what their purpose is and how they're going to express it, and it's kind of like a spiritual chamber of commerce where we all support each other in our different, you know, expressions, and we all teach that to others. Actually, we give all that up and come together in the sheer joy and delight of being in each other's presence, and trusting that in that presence, purpose will reveal itself. And then we can invite other people into that, rather than starting with agendas and, you know, conferences that have 16 different speakers all speaking about a different thing. You know, I think people are really looking for love to be demonstrated now in group formation. They want our political parties to be coherent, loving, purposeful beings. They want our teachers to not just speak about brotherhood, but demonstrate brotherhood with each other. They want to be able to feel, if people are in a collective field, that love is in that field. And that love is a function of the heart and of our feminine powers as well as our masculine, that really make relationship itself a priority.
Yeah, I'd really love to see the U.S. Congress embrace love more and demonstrate that. And that feels so resonant. And I'm just curious, you know, group dynamics can be so difficult. How have you really, what sort of kind of pillars in your own group dynamics have you rooted in order to maintain kind of that essence?
Well, I think, you know, love is tested, and it's tested in relationship. You know, that we all know the honeymoon phase, and then there are the group fires that you go through, you know, just in personal relationship. There's the baby crying at 3 a.m. when your honeymoon is, you know, love is gone, and love now becomes actually the willingness to put aside some of your personal desires for the good of the whole. And so group love is the same. Love is fine when everyone's inspired on a purpose, but when it comes down to power issues, emotional, dramas, sexual issues like jealousy and possessiveness and control, and all the way down to the base center where people are wanting to kill each other and run and, control each other, all of those things test love. And they test love down on the physical plane. Money is another great test of love that the world is going through at the moment. How to truly, change our money system so it's an expression of love rather than fear and survival and control. So I would say that living together in residential community brings up issues that we can avoid in our global internet connections, but it does make us understand what love in action truly means when it's tested.
Thank you, Bruce. I'd love to just hear if you could give us an intimate look into your life that how do you deal with kind of moments of being stuck or really not being sure of the way forward? I know you've talked a lot about matter moving up through you and perhaps your work in nature. Could you just describe sort of how you have embraced sort of these personal challenges and letting this move through you?
Yeah, well, I think one of the definitions of relationship that I like is Rilke, who says that people should be guardians of each other's solitude. And so to me, to have an inner life where I can resource myself, I can listen to what's moving inside me, both up from my body, down from spirit, through my heart, times when I'm in nature. And humility is a big part of it because, as I said before, part of power is the invincibility of the human spirit, to really know that there are no external circumstances that can defeat the human spirit. And the other half of power is incredible vulnerability. To be alive and awake on this planet as a living, loving human being with all of the suffering that's going on is incredibly vulnerable. And sometimes I feel totally overwhelmed like everybody else does. And I spend days on my knees. I spend days, where I can barely get out of bed and just hop in the bath and self-love because I'm suffering. But the power is not in distracting myself from that and revving myself up into purpose and driving myself into some, like salvation mode. My true courage in those moments is to embrace my vulnerability, to get on my knees before it and to let it move me, to let myself suffer, to let myself be in the pain of being human and the terrible dislocation I feel as a human being, and to embrace that and trust that moving through me is as important as the power of invincible spirit, grounding me and driving me forward. So acts of deep self-compassion are as important as acts of courage and strength in the world.
Thank you so much for just honoring all the spectrums of life. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. And before we open it up to the group for questions, John, did you want to close with a final question to Bruce?
John's gone now. There's just a light shining.
I'm here. I wanted to, you touched on, just quickly, you touched on the, some of your teachers have been through inner inspiration. Who have been your guides and mentors on your path?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was young, I didn't really want to be human. I didn't like humans. I wanted to be a dolphin or a tree or just about anything other than a human being. Mm-hmm. I studied psychology and ecology, because I wanted to understand the mystery of why people were cruel to each other. And so I don't think I really looked for a human teacher. And so therefore my teachers came in disembodied ways, in a tantric teachers, nature, Dolphins were great teachers for me about joy. Whales were teachers for me. I eventually found a teacher that I could trust, who was a disembodied Tibetan master, whose love and respect for me as a being opened me like a rose eventually. And so I found my first teachers outside the normal human beings. They taught me enough love and trust that I then gradually began to open to embodied humans and embrace them as my teachers as well. And then particularly when my children came along, you know, it's like you can't help but get on your knees before the wisdom of your own children. They became great teachers for me. And now I'd like to think that just about everybody I meet, I'm willing to be a student of, because they are me in another embodied form, and they have brought some different gifts that are also my gifts that I want to breathe in. So I think I started out as unteachable, and now everything teaches me.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you, Bruce. So now we have the opportunity to open it up to people here. So if you have any questions for Bruce, I'd really invite you to write them in the chat box. And we can read the chat box. Yeah, we can offer these questions in. So here we go. Here's one question. Hi, Bruce, John, Andrea, and everyone. Bruce, are the serving force you spoke about earlier on the descending path and the saving force the same? Does this relate to radical and evolutionary awakenings? So I think this is a question about some of the more technical aspects of some of the teaching that's come through you, Bruce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's probably two things to say there. One is that, you know, they are and they're not. That the masculine and feminine originate from the same place and they express differently. There's a world of duality and a world of unity, and so the descending current and the ascending current are ultimately the same, and yet their expression can feel radically different. And in terms of evolutionary enlightenment and radical enlightenment, this is a beautiful and important distinction, I think, that and it also relates to purpose, because we can all see that there is development and growth, and both on the spiritual path and also in the world. And so there's evolutionary enlightenment and there's evolutionary purpose that evolves over time. You have amoebas, and then you have plants, and then you have humans. But radical enlightenment and radical purpose is the life that does not evolve, that it's just a world of being that is underlying everything, all time and space, and is an unchangeable pulse that it can be accessed at any point in evolution. So, you know, the distinction between evolutionary purpose and radical root purpose is an important one.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? So this is from Rob. How do you know when to follow a calling that is flowing through you or not? Like this calling to attract a twin flame relationship.
Right. It's a deep thing, you know, and I think it comes back to what I said before, is that the organ to truly respond to purpose with is the heart. But that organ needs to mature, and we mature the heart in the same way that we would mature our thinking and our mind, is through science. So in our mind, we have a hypothesis, we get some data, we test it out, and then we mature our thinking. And so the same with the heart. You know, the heart loves image, and the heart throws image into the world, and the call for our twin flame, or the call for a job that really thrills us, or all of these impressions, they can come first of all in immature ways, where we give our power away, or we investigate falling in love and we find that actually we were projecting. But to mature the heart means that you actually have to follow the heart. So I would say that there are no guarantees that when you follow purpose, the call of purpose, that is going to lead you to a goal that you want or that is right or is ideal. Sometimes it leads you into places of crisis. It leads you into places of realization that you've been following an illusion to grow you up. But so I would say what I learned to do is follow my heart with discernment and with a scientific approach, which is if I'm following this call, I am going to see where it leads, and then I'm going to refine my instrument, recalibrate my heart based on whether it worked or not. So I can't give an easy answer because, of course, you know, the problem is that we have to grow this organ. And as we grow it, it becomes better and better at aligning us with purpose.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I'd really just like to invite you, Bruce. You know, you said something there which reminded me of your teaching on the Cafe on the Edge. I wonder if you'd be up for sharing your Cafe on the Edge teaching. This is an awesome ditty.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Cafe on the Edge teaching is great for people who are wanting to make the jump. Mm-hmm. And basically what it is for me is that the story goes like this, that you're walking along and you come to this huge cliff, and on this cliff you see this tremendous vista, and you've come to jump. You've come because you know that the spiritual path and your soul journey requires that you make leaps where you don't know the future. You just have this call deep in your being. But you decide, you know, that you should look before you leap, that you should be cautious. So you sit down and you have a cup of tea. And you have a cup of tea on the edge of the bridge, on the edge of the cliff, and then you are going to jump, but you decide after the tea. But then while you're having a cup of tea, somebody else comes along and sits down and you offer them tea. And pretty soon you're talking about jumping. And you are going to jump, but not just yet. And then someone else comes along and you decide, oh my God, there's a lot of people on this cliff. We should open a cafe. And we can have a cafe where we talk about jumping, where we have full moon meditations about jumping, where we write books about jumping, but we don't actually jump. Because jumping, you never know what's going to happen. But we want to be right on the edge. We want to be on the edge of jumping. And then pretty soon you have a cafe, and then you have a franchise, and then you have cafes on every cliff edge in the world. And then the Department of Health and Regulations comes along and says the trouble with this is that you don't have a barrier on the edge. Someone could fall off, so now you have to build a fence along the edge of the cliff that you came to jump over. So, you know, the idea of this is that the human heart has this tremendous capacity to know in a way that our mind doesn't understand. And when we deeply follow it and we walk that path, we're going to come to those cliffs. And if I had my life to live over, I would have jumped sooner, faster, had less tea, built less cafes, had less conversations, and just kept leaping and leaping and let the path unfold before me. So it's a story to tell for those who are looking to find the courage of their heart.
That's I just want to offer a reflection on that. You know, with the deepest love in my heart, Bruce, you're one of the most courageous people I've ever come into contact with. So to hear one of the most courageous people I've ever come into contact with, and one of the most radical people, quite frankly, you're probably the most radical person I've ever met. Like, so one of the most courageous and radical people I've ever come into contact with say, like, I would have leapt sooner. You know, that's I would have taken more risks. That's a deep thing to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, well, of course, the irony is that the inner story is I'm a wimp. You know, like we often express in the outside the opposite of what's on the inside. And the thing for me is I have so much fear often and so much vulnerability. And it's so difficult for me to live as a human being that my jumping is my way of actually keeping myself alive and keeping myself, the life force flowing through me. So for me, I think courage is, you know, someone defined it not as the absence of fear, but what we do in the face of fear. And the truth is I have tremendous fear and tremendous vulnerability daily in my life. And courage is the only answer that my soul can come up with that allows me to live the life that I can be proud of.
Thank you.
So other questions?
Yeah, more questions are coming in. So Jenny Smallshaw, radical awakening, instant enlightenment. I think what you meant to say here, Jenny, you said, are we all lemons? But I think you meant to say, are we all lemmings? Even if we are jumping, isn't it still a good idea to be doing lots of yoga and meditation?
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. I think if it's a good idea for you to do yoga, you'll be called to do yoga. And the irony, I think, in the world is that some people who are busy doing Vipassana, for example, they should probably not be doing that. They should be doing, embodiment practices, martial arts, go boxing or something. Some people who are like so totally into embodiment work, they really need to take a break and deepen their inner life. So we don't really know what's right, and there isn't a path. That's why I like the smorgasbord approach. What does help, though, is to awaken the sovereignty of every human being, which is their own direct connection to source, and then let that become the guide. And so if I'm working with somebody, one person I might advise to stop meditating, another person I'll advise to start meditating. It actually has got nothing to do with the practices that everybody should do. It's got to do with who is this unique embodiment of divinity, and what do they need to bring them into a deeper relationship with themselves.
Thank you. So there's a question from Thorsten, which it's a question is, if you want to make the jump, how do you survive in the meantime until you land? And for me, this question connects into money, and it connects into actually to this integration between purpose and money. And that's another piece that is important in the work that we do with people, is like, not just how does a person connect to their purpose, how do that bring it all the way through, but how do they actually ground themselves financially in the world in a way where the money moving through their life and their purpose are aligned.
Yeah, I deal with this question a lot with people, and many people want a quick solution. They want to actually move from a life that's been driven by fear and control and an inauthentic expression of themselves to a life that is centered in their soul, their contribution, their gift, their love for the world, and they want it to happen overnight, and they want to now get paid for being their soul gift in the world. And the truth is that it doesn't happen like that. It takes time. And some people's lives, it takes tremendous time. Look at someone like a Van Gogh, who spent his life drawing because his heart wouldn't let him stop on bits of cardboard in the street, and that are worth billions of dollars now, but not at the time. So first of all, you have to decide, do you really want it, or is it just another strategy to try to make a living from prostituting your soul? So that's the first question I ask people. And the second is, if you really want it, are you prepared to go through the rehabilitation? Are you prepared to simplify your life so that you cut down your expenses? Are you prepared to give away your soul gifts into the world for a while and expect nothing back from them? Are you prepared to not make $1 million tomorrow, or even enough to pay the rent? Do you care enough about your soul calling to actually embody it in the world? And then when you've made those changes, maybe 2 to 3 years at least for people, then things start to kick in, and the universe starts to recognize that you're serious and that you are deeply giving yourself to love, and it starts to reflect back in terms of financial wealth and expression. So I would say, get ready for the rehabilitation, simplify your life, give things away, give your teaching away or your contribution away, and then trust that the universe will respond to that.
Thank you. So Mia asked a question, and it was kind of a question in jest. What about when one gets accustomed to being a lemming? I feel I've jumped so many times, I've invented the trampoline. What else to do? And I mean, something that comes to me as I fill into your question, Mia, is, there's the strive, drive, jump, intensity is one side of the street, is one side of the coin. And, you know, the other side of the coin is to be able to give ourselves those experiences of stability as best we can, and nurturance that might actually be the radical thing for a certain type of soul. I think for Mia, you know, I know you, Bruce knows you, and maybe the radical piece in your life is that softness and stability. And I wonder if you could say a bit about that, Bruce.
Yeah, well, I totally get that, you know, that sometimes the jump is to not jump. That's the jump. And I know for me in my life, I always considered myself to be a cosmic soul, not particularly rooted on the planet. And then came the time when I went to this island that I live on and fell so deeply in love with the earth and let the earth love me, that I rooted myself there. I grounded myself in this earth so deeply, so deliciously, that I never wanted to move again. And so that was my jump. My jump was to rest, to let myself drop into the earth in one place and know one piece of the earth and explore one rock pool when I had explored the galaxies for so long. You know, so that was my jump, and it was as hard for me to do as leaping bravely on an adventure, because it was about letting myself fall down and land. So I think we'd probably just redefine what jumping means, and sometimes, like you say, it means surrendering to your need for security and safety and landing as much as flying.
And I guess like the key point in all of that is being able to listen deeply with enough compassion for, you know, one's own being to get what is the call for right now.
Right.
So there was a question actually, Bruce, that Andrea and I were considering asking you, but I'd like to use it as a jump off base. So it was a question that Andrea included actually, is we've noticed that many teachers in the transformational community frame their work starting with a crisis. That doesn't seem to be the case with you. Where do you draw your strengths? And I'd like to connect this question to, you know, a topic that we've talked about before, and I know is key to the work that you're in now, which is Peter Kingsley's piece in his book, you know, that civilizations are born on the basis of ecstasy. And you know, I know an exploration you're in is like, how do we create a culture of ecstasy that can be the seed, the dynamic, electric seed of something new being born on this planet that utterly transcends the boundaries that have previously been the basis of culture?
Yep. Yeah, if we wanted to go to the Christian analogy, it would be, how do we have a culture of the risen Christ rather than the crucified Christ? You know, how do we get past this being caught on the cross of initiation, which entails tremendous suffering and owning our suffering? You know, Jung said that all neurosis is the avoidance of legitimate suffering. And my personal view is that the earth humans have avoided legitimate suffering. And so therefore we are on the cross and we are having to suffer. But the cross gives way to the resurrection, and the resurrection is this ecstatic freedom and love. And so the new culture that's coming is built on the ecstasy of having gone through the suffering of our own betrayals, of our own, you know, giving up of love, to come home to love in a very deep way, and then allow the ecstatic current to help build the civilization. And that comes as much through the body as it does through the soul. And so for me, my own learning was to come back to experience the juiciness of what it is to be in life, the miracle of what it is to be in these bodies, this incredible thing that allows such sentient life to manifest, and to integrate our deep spiritual awareness with our deep embodiment. And that ecstatic current, which is tantric really, is what then helps build our relationships with other people and help build a healthy community and a healthy culture.
Beautiful. Thank you. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to offer to Bruce? please define tantric. It's from Riza.
Okay, so it goes back to what I was saying about purpose being not directional but omnidirectional, that it includes it includes paradox. So the tantric path is one that embraces both the descent into the body and through the body into spirit, as it does to ascend via the crown chakra. And so Tantra, historically, the left-hand path has been the one that you're supposed to avoid because it can lead you into the traps and the lures of sexuality and matter before the consciousness is strong enough. And the right-hand path has led us to the ascent of the mountaintop to develop presence and awareness. But a tantric path is one that embraces both directions and recognizes that they're not right or wrong, good or bad in themselves, but the way we integrate them in our own being and the way we grow love as a result of embracing both sides of all dualities. That would be a tantric path.
Thank you. And just something I'd like to, you mentioned the smorgasbord earlier, Bruce, that, something I see in the work that we do is that, I find myself exposed and witnessing a whole bunch of these different kind of scenes in the kind of spiritual purpose consciousness field, as it were. There's a bunch of scenes. There's the kind of shamanic scene and tribal revival scene. There's the tantric scene. There's the non-duality scene, the awakening scene, and so on. Yeah. And something that is a big piece, I think, for us in the global purpose movement to be integrating and exploring is this more feminine side of this work. And I wondered, there's a lot of talk these days. It's a big kind of theme in the collective scene about the rise of the feminine and its role in contemporary spiritual culture. I wondered if you could say a few words about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a big meme, and it has its shadows and it has its good parts. I think that within spirituality and purpose modes, the rise of the feminine has got to do with the Shaktification. And in my own journey, I got electrified first and Shaktified second. Some people do it the other way around, but the electrification is that, cosmic current from the will of God, and the Shaktification is the beautiful uprising of Kundalini and the Shakti part of the life force coming through the body. Mm. And so I personally don't think it's necessarily equates with the feminine. I think that equating the feminine with the earth and with the body and the masculine with spirit and transcendence has its own sets of problems that are also dual. But if we're going to sit within that framework, I think it's really important that spirituality and purpose work has a deep Shaktification. And the converse is also true. I would say that relationship and sexuality work has largely been in the domain of the feminine and the immature feminine, and it needs strong masculine presence. And the way I would see that look in the world, and I think maybe it would be good to talk now a little bit about how we see this playing out globally in the political and other dimensions. And what I see in the global political dimension is that both business and politics are still domains of the masculine, even if we allow people in female bodies into them. Mm-hmm. They basically have to give up their feminine to come in and play the masculine game of goals, direction, progress, bottom line. And the feminine voice in politics and business would be a voice that was responsible to our relationships, to the environment, that placed love and the field of connection between us all as an important priority, and not just be driven by this purpose goal-setting structure of the immature masculine. And the same in the world of relationships and sexuality, it's largely controlled by the immature feminine, and masculine concepts of freedom and autonomy and are largely overridden all of the time by the immature feminine. So I feel like we've divided ourselves again in the world between purpose and relationship, and we have different parts of our being that come to the fore in each. But a deep marriage of the will of God and the will of Goddess is necessary in our political domains as well as in our personal relating domains. So we're seeing all kinds of changes in the way people look at relationships, and we're seeing all kinds of changes in the way people see politics and business.
Thank you. So for people who might not be so familiar with this framework, could you say a little bit about how you see the difference between the mature and immature masculine and the mature and the immature feminine?
Right. Well, I would say that the mature masculine develops from not feeling enough, and therefore needing a purpose and to achieve something, whether it's financial success or spiritual success, or making a difference in the world by being the one that, brings water to the third world. All of those are coming from, in the immature masculine, a need to shore up identity by achievement. It could be spiritual achievement, it could be financial achievement, but it's some kind of achievement. And normally when the immature masculine fails and initiates itself, it realizes that already was purpose. Before it had purpose, before it achieved anything, it already was presence and it already was enough. That's the initiation of the immature masculine to the mature. And the feminine tends to find itself in its immaturity seeking love, seeking relationship, seeking outside itself for loving, harmonious relationship. And then it normally goes through a sense of betrayal or loss and awakens and initiates itself into realizing it is love, like its fundamental nature is love. So immature masculine will drive towards achievement because of a need for identity, and immature feminine will cling and hold on and grasp and control because it's seeking love when it actually is love.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And the last, the other thing I want to say about that is that the immature feminine is most strongly present in men, and the immature masculine most strongly present in women, because we're still integrating these polarities in our culture. So we end up in this hall of mirrors and this gendered debate in the world.
And it's something I've heard you say before, that, what's interesting is that when you have the mature masculine show up, it shows up automatically with the mature feminine, that they come together.
Yeah. And, then we can bypass all of this idea of the patriarchy and the repression of the feminine and so on. And it is really good to realize that a lot of our civilization has been based on the repression of eros and the repression of the life force, because it was seen to be a negative or something that would undermine civilization. So there has been a battle between these two energies. But the mature energies don't do that, because the masculine and the feminine show up together. The masculine would never repress the feminine because he knows that her life force and her power is absolutely essential to creation. And the feminine would never be angry or rejecting of the masculine, because she knows without that presence, actually the whole universe can't dance. So these energies, most of our battles with them are internal battles, and we are trying to seek a deep marriage in our own being between these energies. And of course, we outpicture that in the world and in the battles between genders and the battles in our politics.
Thank you. Okay, so just one last question, Bruce, before we move to a close. This is from Resonant. It's a nice question. What is it like to be in community in the temple trainings? What's that like?
Yeah, well, it's beautiful and terrible. What it's like is first of all the experience of what the Maoris would call Turanga Waiwai, which is a sacred place to stand. Most of us were not welcomed into this planet as souls. We weren't sung in as the divine beings that we are. Most of us carry a sense of alienation and separation that we're still finding out that whether we belong here or not. So to truly come into soul community is to be welcomed into a world in a way that maybe some of us have never been welcomed, to realize that there are many like us, and that as we all come together, these hermit soul types, that we feel safe with each other and we can open and be part of a community in ways that we never could before. So that's one side of it, is the deep sense of coming home into soul community. The other side of it, the terrible side of it, is that because you are with powerful, strong souls, they see through all of your bullshit and they cross-reference it with half a dozen other people who all see you so clearly. And so you are totally naked before the gaze of love. And one of the terrible things is that when love does show up in your life, everything that's not love surfaces. Mm. And so finding ourselves in loving community can be as a terribly challenging experience as the one that we long for. We both long to be seen, but we're longing not to be seen because we're seen in our fullness. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing everything that we are rather than just the good stuff in the shop window. So it's incredibly challenging to be in the gaze of and the embrace of love and community, and incredibly restful and an incredible coming home. And it's in that process that soul initiation happens.
Mm. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you.
Mm.
So we're coming up to the end of the time. I really appreciate so much you having taken this time to share with us and to share yourself with us. And I feel deeply grateful, and very grateful also for everyone who's been with us during this time. I know for those of us in Europe, it's kind of late into the night. So, Andrea, is there anything you wanna share before we move to a close?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruce. Wow, this was such a powerful time to spend together. It was fun hanging out, and all of you draping your arms around each other and smiling and gazing your eyes. We could all do like a eye soul gaze right now. We'll save it for the next time. Before we sign off, I'd just love to share with you an event that we have coming up called the Purpose Summit in San Francisco on 11/11 and 11/12. It'll be 2 days of inspiring speakers who will engage in this conversation in a further way, and a good time to see our community and connect. And we have a $50 off deal with the code word Bruce. So you can remember that from today, and it lasts for 2 days. And if you would like more information, you can check that out at thepurposesummit.org. So I will go ahead and put that in the chat box right now.
I can do that. Here we go.
You got it?
Yeah. I'll put that,
okay.
Put that in for everyone. And that, Carly told me earlier. There we go. The links in the chat box for everyone. That's Bruce with all caps. Bruce with all caps is your coupon. So I hope you feel good about it.
It's more like Bruce.
Yeah,
is the code.
Yeah.
Exclamation point. And could we all just unmute ourselves for a moment and just everyone?
There we go. Everyone is now unmuted.
Hi,
Bruce.
Hi. Hallelujah.
So hopefully we'll all get to hang out in New Zealand at Haydn one day.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a plug for Bruce's work. Check out Haydn. Look up Haydn on. I'll put it in the chat box as well. This is Bruce's work.
So if everybody just wants to feel into one word that you're feeling right now, we'll just say it at one time to cement our field, and then we'll end the call. So just take a breath. Here we go. How y'all feeling? Inspired.
Beautiful.
Enriched.
Cool.
Grateful.
Awake.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you both, and thank you for your presence. Thanks for the field to speak into, and your own journeys and your loving connections. Also, I want to, like I had this inspiration in the bath last night about global purpose that I wanted to share, but I don't. We'll have to have another one of these sometime.
Okay. Yeah, I am absolutely up for us doing it again. Let's do that.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Much love to everyone, and thank you for taking this time, and we'll see you again.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.